We get the golden point is the top of the unfinished pyramid. So these are amazingly beautiful in their precision of line quality, but it's the placement of the line which is far more powerful, because there's plenty of engravings you can look at that are not as compelling as money, and it's not the simple fact that it says dollar on it that makes it that way. That these are very golden. Just something to think about when you're out there spending your money.
Welcome back. Now, we're over with the golden ratio for tonight. I hope I have not saturated your right hemisphere, and I hope I've liberated your left, or the other way around. I'm not sure. Now, I met someone recently who is an expert on the right brain and the feminine sacred principle. And she might be a guest on our show in the future. She gives talks on this aspect of the human psyche. And she's a pretty smart woman, and I'd like to share her intro with you. We have a little clip here for about 5 minutes where she's going to do her thing. And she is pretty good with this. Let's roll it, Francisco.
Any takers? What? Oh, wow, right on. And nobody said anything I had to not repeat. Very good. That's right. Half your brain. Half of that 3-pound ball of gray and white matter in your head. Half of that meat ball in your cranium. And yes, it is the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere is known as the masculine hunter-killer hemisphere, and the right hemisphere is known as the feminine gatherer-nurturer hemisphere. Both hemispheres developed over 3 million years of evolution, and yet we live in a society that is left-brain dominant. Professor Roger Sperry, Nobel Prize-winning psychobiologist, wrote, "There appear to be 2 modes of thinking, verbal and nonverbal, represented by the left and right hemispheres respectively, and our education system, as well as science in general, tend to neglect the nonverbal form of intellect. What it comes down to is that modern society discriminates against the right hemisphere. Albert Einstein wrote, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is its faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant, but has forgotten the gift. That, our conscious mind can only focus on information from one hemisphere at a time. We can switch back and forth very, very quickly, but ultimately only information from one hemisphere will reach our consciousness. And in our left-brain dominant society, that hemisphere tends to be the left hemisphere. So that even tasks that would be better handled by the right hemisphere tend to be processed by the less skilled left side for that task. Now, people with optimal intelligence effectively. But most people do not reach their maximum potential, and they go through life without ever really knowing their other half. Now, experiments show that children write highly creative right brain before they enter school, but then they shift because of the skills our education system values. Then we grow, and we have to learn various means and methods to access our right brain intelligence. For example, the repetition of mantras and meditation to lull the left hemisphere into dozing off so that information from our right hemispheres can reach our consciousness. Or people rely on dreams as a guide to the rich information of their right hemispheres. Now, as the co-creators of a new paradigm, we do need to explore the terrain of the right hemisphere of the brain. And we'll do it by shaking up the mountains in our left hemisphere, and by shaking up the hierarchical structures that we have built as a left-brain dominant society. So we will chart our expedition, since we know that right-brain integrated cultures tend to venerate the feminine. We're going to chart this expedition with an exploration of the goddess archetype. Now, what is an archetype? We're drawing on psychology. An archetype is an inward image in the human psyche that exerts a powerful influence on the nature of an individual personality and in turn on the larger culture. And I'll say that again. An archetype is an inward image in the human psyche that exerts a powerful influence on the nature of an individual personality and in turn on the larger culture. So we will look at the archetype of the goddess to help us to get a glimpse of how our brains are organized. Now, I have no pictures to show you. I'll act them out. This is the goddess of Willendorf. I am round, and I am full. I am a mother who has birthed all of creation, and in my abundance, I nurture that which I love so dearly. In fact, the goddess of Willendorf actually stands like this. She's so peaceful in her presence. There's the most recent one is the Venus of Hohlfels. That's the oldest piece of figurative art that we had. It was only unearthed in 2008. Very exciting. She has these wonderful, wonderful breasts. Comes down to her belly and you see her sacred yoni and everything's just right there. And she's this wonderful, sexual mother of all things. Now, of course, when the news came out that she was unearthed, she had her big public announcement in May of this year. Ready for the headlines? Paleolithic poem. Paleolithic, because it's from the Paleolithic era. In fact, it's from the far reaches of the edge of the Paleolithic era. Stone Age man's sex goddess. Buxom babe for the Stone Age.
And you can see her website in ourrightminds.com. A few words about fractals before we do a couple of fractal zooms. It's basically a plot of numbers, a graph, based on a simple algorithm that's very much related to the golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence type of iteration process. The bottom line is every still image of a Mandelbrot set picture represents the graph of positive and negative, imaginary and real numbers. We're going quickly. Can you hold it? Reset. Well, we'll just let go. There's a nice song with that. But I just want you to realize when they create these zooms, all they're doing is adding some zeros to the precision, and because it's unlimited, you can always keep adding zeros, and the images change, and that's just a function of mathematics, and it's it's part of chaos theory. And Benoit Mandelbrot recently passed away. He was the guy who got us these images back about 25 years ago. This started, of course, it goes back further than that as far as chaos theory itself. But let's just take a look at this little Mandelbrot zoom, and we'll be right back.
On the far horizon, then you'll find me with all the streamers tied behind me, like a box kite on a ribbon string. All the trinkets in the box I bring. I'll be home again on the next
Listen to some old music from the 60s. You can get the song list on our YouTube site. YouTube, a show about everything. Now, coming up here is a 5.5 minute piece of a new theory that I found on the web, and I thought it was quite compelling. I don't know how true it's going to be, but it's a nice twist on an old theory. He's throwing out plate tectonics and continental drift and replacing it with the expansion theory of the Earth. He's saying the Earth has expanded from a small size, and that's how we got the oceans. It just the continents have not actually moved on the surface of the planet. The planet itself has enlarged. Let's check it out, and it's got some good computer graphics, and it's at least of all, it's interesting.
We come to the Earth, which, well, grew to get here, the way it is now. Here is our world, our planet Earth, floating in space. We will be going backward in time, imperfectly, but done in a very disciplined manner. Please notice there is no subduction, no rotation of tectonic plates, no twisting, no form-fitting, no altering shapes or sizes. It would be impossible. Impossible for these continental plates to fit together perfectly without this being true, and yet the upper tectonic plates fit together perfectly on a much smaller planet. Yes, there's been some erosion, landslides, blah blah, but overall this activity is insignificant. There is a kind of conspiracy of silence among certain scientists. They know but are not telling you that the upper tectonic plates of Earth also join in the Pacific. Not partially, they join totally. You are asked to believe that the continents swim or drift about willy-nilly, bumping and crashing as if they were on a greased skillet. This is not true. The simple truth is apparently too upsetting to too many apple carts. We're now going forward in time to show how the actual growth of the Earth took place. Imperfect as to details, but the overall is nailed. Antarctica, as you see, has become subtropical. Africa on a smaller globe moved way downward under the globe. In fact, for hundreds of millions of years, the bottom of Africa was the South Pole. South America's tail goes under and wraps around the bottom of Africa. Then incredibly, it joins coast with Antarctica. 65 million years ago and more, these continents were joined, and marsupials like the duck-billed platypus roamed from Australia, Antarctica, and across southern South America and up into Africa. The platypus. Dinosaurs roamed all over this world on the upper tectonic plate because there were no oceans, just shallow seas. Here today, Antarctica is frozen over, and Australia and its surrounding islands are the remaining home of marsupials. Do you see how broadly the Pacific is opening compared to the Atlantic? This is exactly why the knee-jerk Pangea theory exists. The Pacific spread is too difficult to easily visualize because it's so big. The Atlantic spread is so obvious that a child would recognize it, but they are the same. Check this map out. The Navy and others took core samples to find the ages of the sea bottom. Lo and behold, no part of the undersea was found to be much older than 70 million years old. Does that shock you? It should. It shocked the scientists. Where do they get ancient fish fossils from? From the land, like in Mississippi and Utah and France and China. Most of the undersea wasn't there 70 or 80 million years ago. The measurements of the core samples give the age of the sea floor. Newest, 10 million or so, is red. As we go back in time, we go backward in our rainbow, orange, yellow, green, blue, okay? So we bury the new sea floor back to the fault lines as dictated by color or age. 10 million years back, these are the ages of the seafloor as measured by science, and they're generally true. Earth grew. 20 million? I'm not making this information up. This map comes from the scientific community. 30 million. You can find the same map in many places on the internet. It's common knowledge. 40. The ocean bottom is from 1 year to 180 million years old. 50. 70% of it is no older than 60 million years old. 60. The upper plate, the continents, are as old as 2 billion years old and more. 70. 10 to 20 times as old as the undersea plates. The undersea plate is new and spreading at the rifts. Why does the scientific community desperately cling to and promote the idea that the ocean bottom is sliding under the continents and into a magma which is twice as dense as solid granite? A totally unsupportable and scientifically unsound idea? They have to. Or else they'd have to observe and admit that the Earth is growing. And that, viewers, is a very big deal. that would change everything in science, from the smallest particle to the whole universe. 100 years of scientific theory